Hey everyone, welcome back. So we're at the point in the build where we are back on another hour-long retractable skeg video. And I'm just going to say from the outset that this really isn't meant to be entertainment for anybody. This video is an hour long because it's supposed to be for people who are about to build a retractable skeg system in their boat, and they want to see as much as they can see about it before embarking on the project. So I'm going to show you everything that I do in order to implement my skeg. First, I'll show you some of the actual metal parts that I use, and then the tubing and the cable, and even the hose clamps. And here I'm figuring out the position for the skeg. I don't put it directly on the keel because it just isn't a good idea. So offset it a little bit. And if you ever happen to see plans for this boat or somehow a kit, all of this is already figured out. But when I did this, I was doing it for myself. So on the last video series, I cut it out by hand, and since then I've upgraded, so I get to do it on a laser, which is awesome. I love it. So anyway, here on the laser we're cutting out the skeg and the skeg box, and then these are the spacers for the skeg box. And I've chopped them all up into little puzzle pieces just to save room. But those will all go together and be in the shape of the skeg box. And here I'm just convincing myself that it's going to work. But it does. So you see there, that's the barb fitting, and I'm looking at the location of where it's going to get drilled, just to kind of check the sizes. And then I'll mount the rivet nut inside of the skeg. That's going to hold the set screw. I used these little metal parts in these things because I didn't trust the epoxy or the wood to hold a thread. And it's probably over-engineered. I think it would have been fine if I had just tapped into the epoxy, but I use them anyway. So if you don't want to do it that way, I don't think you actually need to, but I do. So here I'm piecing together the skeg box spacers. There's going to be 3, so total the skeg box is 5 pieces of wood thick. I was thinking that blue painter's tape wasn't going to hold to crazy glue, but in fact it did, so I switched over to this clear packing tape. And I'm using it just to help me hold the shape of the skeg box in place while I'm gluing these things. Okay. Now these two are different than this one, that's why I kept them separate. The channel on the middle one is going to be running higher, and it's going to help guide the cable. You'll see. You'll see. Okay, this one is the middle. So you can see the difference in the shape of the channel. I'm going to keep them separate for now. Now I'm marking and cutting this little rod because it's going to fit inside of the skeg there, so that there's something inside that the cable will go into. So when the set screw presses it, it'll be pressing into this little piece of rod. So it's not going to be able to deform the wood. And again, it was just because I didn't want anything to wear out. So the cable will go into the skeg and sit inside of this hollow rod that I'm cutting a hole in that's going to have the set screw going into. So the set screw will compress the cable inside that rod, and that's how it's going to attach to the cable. Or the cable is going to attach to the skeg. Like that. And then these little pieces of wood that I'm using as the walls to enclose the hardware, I need to file out a little bit just to make it fit against that rivet nut. Alright, this part's a little delicate because right now the only thing holding it together is crazy glue. But I'm going to put a set screw inside here, and then it's going to go into the tube that I'll put in there, and I'll seal it off and glue it all together. And hopefully I don't permanently glue the set screw inside. That's peace. Okay, something like that. Now we'll get it all put together. Just to make sure the epoxy doesn't go in and permanently mess up the threads, I'm putting a little bit of hot glue just where it connects so that epoxy cannot get in there. But mostly I'm leaving it clean so that the epoxy can bond as much as it needs to just to get it all put together nice and secure. And again, you see me hollowing out that little piece of wood just to get it to fit over the set screw, or to get it to fit over the rivet nut. So it'll go together like that. I'm going to take that out while I'm gluing. I'm going to plug the holes with tape wrapped around some rods. I'm being very careful here not to let any of the thickened epoxy get inside of the rivet nut because I don't want any of the threads to get clogged up. That would make the whole thing completely pointless. I decided to give it a little bit more space by cutting some more wall pieces out of this 1.5mm thick plywood. And this step here isn't necessary. I don't need any extra thickness on the skeg box. I did this so that I didn't have to sand down the sides of the skeg itself. The skeg is a total of 3 pieces of 4mm wood thick, and the inside of the skeg box is 3 pieces wide. So it's very tight, so you're going to have to sand down the outside pieces of the skeg just to get it to be able to move freely. So instead of sanding it, I just added a little bit of extra thickness, but it's really not necessary. While I'm doing this glass and epoxy, I'll go ahead and glass the first half of the bulkheads and the half of the hip braces. So we'll just start moving along here. I don't know why I keep saying that. I've been moving along. There's one more part I forgot. I'm going to add 2 spacer pieces to this to strengthen it. So I'll go cut those real quick. 1 sec. when working with epoxy, you need at least an overnight to get it to set. So when you're lining up all of your stuff, you kind of want to have multiple things going at once so that you can do all of your epoxy, call it a day, and wait until the next day to get going again. So you really kind of want to multitask. I'm not going to glass the skeg yet because I'm going to get it all put together and then I'll glass the whole thing once it's all done. Real quick, while I'm mixing my epoxy, let's do something I like to do. And I don't try to glue everything together all at once. I do the spacers first and let that set, and then later I'll go back and attach a wall and then another wall, but not everything at once. So we'll get all the spacers together, and then I'll get the other pieces of glass wet out, and then I will go and thicken the epoxy, and that's when I'll put on the pieces that go onto the skeg. So here I'm glassing the skeg box walls, and I'll get those bulkheads glassed on one side. Everything gets glassed on both sides, but only one side at a time. But this video is not about bulkhead glass, so we're going to skip over that. Nope. Not wasting epoxy, that's for sure. Now we're going to cut out the pieces for the knob control slot, the skeg control slot up by the cockpit. So this here is the knob. And again, I just do it with the laminating pieces. This is similar to what I did on the last build, but this time I'm doing it on the laser, which is great. With the thicker wood. Last time I used a very weak laser, so I needed 22 pieces of wood to do it because they were all very thin. But this is the 4mm wood. And then I'll cut out the walls for the box. And the knob is going to sit on this 1/4" tube, and that's going to ride inside of the 3/8" tube. So right here I'm just fitting on the knob just to check it all out. The pieces inside the knob are going to also accept one of those rivet nuts so that I can thread into that instead of trying to thread into the epoxy or the wood. But that's the control knob, and inside is going to be the rivet nut that's going to hold the set screw in place that runs through this channel in the center. Okay. So that's the new arrangement, just like that. And now for the control slot, I just go on here. Two of these are thicker than the others. Okay. I find the easiest way to do this is just to line it all up and then throw some tape over it so you can pick it all up in one piece and still wrap it around the radius there. And you'll see what I mean here. And then when I spot weld it with the crazy glue, I'm not trying to glue it to that rod. That rod needs to come out because it's going to get cut in half. So when I'm crazy gluing it, I'm just connecting the pieces of wood. And I don't need a whole lot of crazy glue because it'll all get covered in epoxy and then fiberglass. So really you're just spot welding with the crazy glue. You don't want to rely too much on crazy glue for any real structural support. It's not very strong, so it really only acts as, another set of hands to help you hold stuff. But epoxy is where the real strength comes from. And I like to add a little bit of stain just to kind of hide the inside of that control knob slot. It's not really a focal point of the boat, so I want it to sort of just to disappear. Okay, well, that's plenty of clearance in there, and then you got to have enough room for the actual kayak, the walls of the kayak. So there's a gap between the box and the lip of the knob. But that'll do it. There you go. And now that after the glass is set on the skeg box walls, I give it a trim. And then before I glue the spacers to the walls, I will give it a good scuffing, just to give it something to really grab onto. So I hit it with the Dremel and give it a bit of a depth, give it a groove for that epoxy to get into. It gives a little extra strength. And I should be wearing a mask here. You really don't want to be breathing that glass, the flying glass powder. My bad. So here I'm marking and cutting in half the 3/8 tube. It's going to go on either side of that control box that we glued up a second ago. And that's a pretty rough cut, so I'll use this file to clean it up a little bit. I can only imagine what it would be like if I had the right tools to do the stuff I do. That'd be very cool. And it's very important that these things get glued in nice and straight, so I'm actually using another rod temporarily just to hold them in place while I get them glued. And I'll tack them in place with some crazy glue, but again, I don't want to tack too much because I want the epoxy to be able to get to it. So after I do that, I'll encase the entire thing in a coat of thickened epoxy. And I'm preparing to glue up the knob now. And it's out of frame, but that's the knob that I'm gluing up there. Whoops. I guess I'll have to fire my cameraman. Yeah, on this control slot, I'm really going to glop it on. I really want to cover this thing in thickened epoxy on the outside because I just want to toughen the whole thing up, make sure it doesn't ever want to come apart. And the inside and the outside are also going to get glassed eventually, but right now I'm just glopping it up. I'm cleaning up the squeeze out on the skeg box. I don't really want anything in there to catch up on the skeg itself, so I got to make sure that's nice and clean. Alright, after everything is set, I'll come back and do something else. It's a little sloppy right now, but it'll get cleaned up. Okay. It's probably hard to see on the camera, but there's a channel where I want the cable to run, and I'll drill a hole through right there to put the fitting So the cable will come in, it'll fit in that channel, and then connect into there. And that's how it'll do that. Not sure who I'm trying to convince here, you or myself. I'm always trying something different, and this little gap in the spacers is kind of new on this build, and I'm not sure if I love it or not, but spoiler alert, it works out. Pretty snug. Pretty snug. We'll see. So now I'm going to get this hole drilled so I can install the barbed fitting. Barb fitting or barbed fitting? I don't know. Either way, it's barb. Whoa. Now we go one bigger. I'm looking for barb. Because there she is. That's what's going to screw in there. So that was the pilot hole. And now I'll go one size larger. Or however much. I don't remember what that is. I'm going to say it's a 1/2 inch. It might be not. It might be, yeah, 3/8. It's 3/8. So I'll do that next. Okay, let me get the cable. Okay. So it goes, it's a little frayed. Okay. There you go. You can see it runs inside that channel. And it runs. Cool. Clearing out that channel. And now that's obviously going to get epoxied in place nice and snug. So it's fine. It's fine. Now that's nice and smooth. Alrighty. Great. Progress. Alright, so this rod is just going to be the pivot. It's just the 3/16. And if you made the hole bigger on the skeg, you could use some of the larger one. But I just used the smaller stuff because, I don't know, I did. But really, there's no rules. However you want to do it, whatever. The world is your burrito. Go ahead and smear some glue all in here to get it nice and sealed up and smooth, and then we'll glue it shut.
Be safe.
I think if you've been watching my build videos, you probably know me well enough by now. I use all of the wrong tools, and I use them all the wrong way. There's just nothing really else to say about it. So I'm laminating together these pieces of plywood to make the knob to control the skeg. And in the middle is the rivet nut that will accept the set screw and press it against the rod. So I'm going to get this glued up just like that. I thought I already glued that up. Interesting. Oh well. Movie magic. So there, I didn't glue it up. I was gluing something else. I guess I don't have to fire my cameraman after all. Yeah, there you go. I'm gluing it up. Alright, so the knob is glued together. Now I'm adding the other wall to the skeg box. So we'll get the barb fitting in there, and then we'll get the rod in there and glue on the second wall of the skeg box, completely enclosing it. And hopefully it goes well, because you can't see inside anymore. Really want to make sure I get the alignment right. I don't want that rod going through it to be crooked, because then it wouldn't be a good pivot point, would it? I think it's worth mentioning at this point that this is all very, very easy. Like, don't be nervous. You got this. It's easy. Alright, now everything's glued together and set, and now I'm giving it a nice sanding. I'm going to shape it up a bit. All that squeeze out all over it, and then I'm going to kind of round off the top edges too. I don't want it to be completely, sharp edges. And give it a little bit of a softened bevel. And I thought about leaving this thing as it was, just layers of plywood, but I end up staining the whole thing, so you really don't see any wood on it at all. But it might look cool with the, the side of the plywood visible. I don't know. This is at least 5 minutes of video I can cut out. This video might actually be less than an hour if I cut out all of this. Okay, now that I've got it stained, I'm just cleaning out that hole to make sure it can fit on the rod. Okay, well at some point I glassed the inside of the control knob slot, and I'm trimming it up. I'm not sure I filmed that. Anyway, I also got some glass on the skeg. I think I might have missed some stuff, but this video is too long, so it's okay. Now I'm glassing the outside of the skeg knob slot, the control slot, and getting it all nice and wrapped. So this thing will be strong. Those bars, the tubes coming out of it are not going to be able to go anywhere. And then I'm glassing the other side of the skeg. And with a little movie magic, it's already set. In previous videos, I noticed that I kept saying dry, and I meant to say set because the epoxy doesn't dry. Alright, so we get to change gears and start chopping a hole in the boat. And this is not nerve-wracking at all. There's really nothing to worry about. You're just completely gashing a hole in your boat. No problem. Just go right ahead and just jump in. Measure once and cut twice, you know? This tool is actually very handy for this step. I found it at a garage sale. I never would have bought one of these things, but the price was perfect and I didn't really have a use for it in mind, but for that task, it is actually ideal. Then I got these cut everything router bits for the Dremel, and I mean, I like the Dremel. It chews through everything. I use it a lot. It's kind of a crutch, really, for just all sorts of tasks. And I think the trick for me is to cut small, and then you can work on making it bigger and getting it fitted in. But I always cut the hole a little bit too small, and then kind of use a file or something to, or a sander to work it to the right size.
It's better than it should. Quite a gap. Whoops. Obviously that's supposed to be inside. I gotta trim that. But okay. I guess I'll go ahead and cut this. So this laser line right here is the absolute do not cross line when trimming this into place. So I'm not even going to cut it right there yet. That's like the farthest I can cut it, but I might not cut it that far. So for now I'm just going to trim off the bottom so I can see inside and get it to fit a little bit. And I'll trim off the rest of this post and clean it up. Okay, here we go.
I guess here I'm still trying to convince myself that it's right. And crazy glue is just temporary. It's just going to be extra fingers to hold it in place while I'm doing the epoxy. So that'll all get sanded off after I cut that outer piece. That laser line I said was the absolute do not cross line. See how it's inside the hull? And so when I cut this flush, even on this side where I'm taking off more, I'm not going to cut deeper than that laser line. So, perfect.
add some thickened epoxy down in there on the seams. And then I will add glass. I want it pretty thick, but hopefully it's not too thick. Good old peanut butter. And I'm really working it down into that crack.
You didn't think I was going to leave all that epoxy sitting there, did you? Give me more credit than that.
I'm not too concerned about waste right now because any excess epoxy is just going to go right into the ends as part of the end pour. Alright, now I'll put some glass all on it. And it doesn't have to be perfect all in this first step. I can put some on and then let it dry, trim it off, and put on some more if it doesn't all go on nice and smooth. So nothing really to stress out about right here. Just make sure it's good and strong. Part of good and strong is making sure you mix enough. Last thing in the world you want is to not mix it enough. That'll ruin everything. And then everyone will laugh at you. Okay.
I want to say this is all bias cut glass. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure I would have cut this at a 45-degree angle so that it can get around all of these edges. And then again, maybe not.
Isn't that just the most wonderful noise in the world? Yeah, I love that. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. I can trim it and add more. In fact, it's already pretty well epoxied, so it may not even be necessary. That's nice. I'm gonna let that cure, and then I'm just gonna cut off and sand off anything that's bubbled up, and I'm gonna put 2 pieces on the side. So this whole thing's getting nice and glassed. It's real strong. It's real good. No problem. Everything's fine. So good. It's beautiful.
See how easy this is? You definitely should be building a boat. If you're just pretending you're going to build a boat and you're watching this video, please, build a boat. It doesn't have to be perfect. Perfect is stupid. You just have to have fun. Of course, this is all after that epoxy is set. This is next day stuff. It may look like I'm just wearing the same thing and doing this a minute later, but truth is I just wear the same thing anyway. This is like the next day. It must be a weekend. So to prepare for chopping off that extra piece, I'm going to cover it with tape and use that cutting board so I don't gouge up the glass that I've already got on the hull. Tell you the truth, I think some 40 grit sandpaper would have made short work of that thing, but I used the little saw anyway, and then I hit it with some sandpaper.
Don't tell my wife I used her kitchen cutting board.
And I'm putting this tape down just to give me a visual warning if I'm sanding too far. It's really not going to do anything to stop the sandpaper, but I'll get an idea if I'm doing something wrong before I do too much wrong. And I think that's probably 50 grit right there. So I'm being quite aggressive, so I really want to know if I'm doing too much somewhere. The paper will, or the tape will tell me. But we'll get it sanded nice and flush, and then I'll actually sand a little bit inside of it too to give it a bit of a bevel. And we're kind of coming into the home stretch on this video. I'm not going to show installing the control knob slot in the deck. That'll come later on. And then of course the final setup when I install the whole thing, that's at the end of the whole build series. So really in this one we're going to just cover installing the skeg box itself. So it's almost everything I know about a retractable skeg. But I think at this point in the build, this is definitely going to get you at least started on the process. So now that it's nice and smooth, I'll go ahead and glass over that entire hole. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to add an extra strip of glass over the bow and the stern to finalize the glassing process for the hull. That'll give it the extra strength at the ends, for impacts. And I'll give the whole hull another coat of epoxy just to shore it all up. Probably not necessary, but I do it anyway. Make sure everything's covered in epoxy, and then I'll lay on the glass and get it wetted out. And if you made it this far in the video, you are a maniac. So if you're not building a boat, I don't know what's wrong with you. I expect if you're watching this far into it, you're building a boat. But if you're not, I hope you decide to at some point. You really should. It's very nice. But anyway, that's going to do it. Thank you very much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end here, you're one of the real ones. And I suggest you don't try to film and use razor blades at the same time.
Yeah, alright. I'm going to stab myself. Oh, that's not going to work. I'm going to stab myself. I just know it. Here it comes. It keeps happening. I'm going to stab myself. Alright, I didn't stab myself.
Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Later.